views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
It's no secret that the Bronx has challenges that its richer neighbors to the north and south do not. It ranks last among New York counties in terms of health outcomes, has some of the poorest school districts, and some of the highest air pollution rates. But the Bronx also has people who care about it fiercely, who want its residents to succeed despite the disadvantages and stereotypes of the borough. Welcome to Bronx Connections, Election 2020 Local Lens. I'm Eliot Schiaparelli, reporter and anchor at WFUV. That's the NPR affiliate station based on the Rose Hill campus of Fordham University in the Bronx. And this is the final episode in a 5-part series covering issues in the 2020 presidential election that will affect the Bronx. It's a joint initiative between WFUV, BronxNet, and Norwood News. Over the past 5 weeks, we've talked to individuals, city officials, and nonprofits working in the Bronx to improve their community. They're working at the local level to solve many of the issues being talked about on the national level. Two things we have yet to talk about that make a major difference in getting the Bronx and other low-income communities on equal footing are housing and education. Joe Biden also says economic stimulus for small minority-owned businesses is necessary due to the pandemic.
But removing the barriers for Black and brown entrepreneurs to start and grow businesses is only one of many things we have to do to close the racial wealth gap in this nation. Expanding Black and brown home ownership is another. Today, American cities, there are a number, where about 75% of white Americans own their homes, only 25% of Black and brown citizens or Black citizens own their homes.
I talked to Jumelia Abrahamson and Jacob Udell from the University Neighborhood Housing Project. They agreed that growing wealth is much harder in the Bronx due to a history of redlining and now predatory lending, but they stressed it's not impossible. So what is UNHP's mission?
So UNHP mission is to create, preserve, and improve affordable housing and bring needed resources to the Northwest Bronx. And that's usually housing and financial services. So we offer a range of filing taxes, helping people file their tax return. We help people search for affordable housing through the New York City Housing Lottery portal. And we help residents create a budget, improve their credit, and hopefully build some savings and assets.
I do want to let you guys talk specifically about some of the programs at UNHP, starting with the financial education program.
At the core of our mission is to bring resources to the neighborhood as a response to redlining and alternative services. So University Neighborhood Housing Program founded the Northwest Bronx Resource Center, which is where we offer all of our direct services. And it's really in direct response to the costly services that are available in the neighborhood. So all of our services are free. And we make sure that at the core of all those services, financial education is at the top of it. So we teach financial literacy in a group setting. Pre-COVID, so right now that's all happening virtually, either through webinars or through one-on-one counseling session via the phone or through Skype. And what we want to make sure that all participants get during those sessions is that they understand that no matter how much money they're earning, if they fully understand the principle of budgeting, savings, and credit, they would be at the control of their finances and hopefully achieve financial stability, which is the long-term result of having the proper financial literacy components.
What about your affordable housing program? How do you help people navigate the New York City Housing Lottery, which is just notoriously confusing?
It's very confusing, especially during COVID time right now. It's even a little bit harder. The website has been revamped. So we are in the process of showing our program users how to create this new portal, and how the information on their profile can really help them secure housing through a lottery system. So our work is really to walk people through how to create that account, how to enter their income and household members, and how to see if they qualify for any of the lotteries that are currently available on the website. And then how to constantly visit the website to continue to apply, which is the key to make sure the more lotteries they apply, the better their chances of being invited for an interview.
And I'll just add on to that. I think one of the experiences that, Jumelia in the Northwest Bronx Resource Center, has seen firsthand when it comes to helping people with their housing connect is just how few units are available to the type of people who are our clients, right? The type of people who live in the Northwest Bronx. So a household making in the $25,000 to $40,000 range annually, that it's just so hard to find any new apartment that way, both in terms of both because you're in the sea of people in that income range who are actually looking for safe and affordable and decent housing, and because of just how few units like that are actually created through the affordable housing development pipeline.
In terms of availability of units and ability to apply for them and get those units, in your research pre and post pandemic, what have you seen?
Yeah, so in terms of our research looks at a bunch of different things. I think as a baseline, right, in terms of things like household income, in terms of things like rent burden, or the amount of income on a monthly basis that's paid toward that, which is paid towards rent, in terms of overcrowding, or the amount of people who live in an apartment on a per room basis, eviction rates, all of those things are more dire and happen at higher rates in the Bronx and the Northwest Bronx, right? And so that speaks to things like the concentration of poverty and housing instability, which is a fact of life for many Bronxites who walk through our door, and the Bronxites that are represented by the sort of borough-wide data. The other part of our research has to do with looking at building conditions and physical and financial distress in buildings. So we have a long-standing database that's more than a decade old called the Building Indicator Project that is actually citywide, and it tracks every multifamily rental building across New York City. So that's buildings with 5 or more units, and tries to identify buildings that might be in physical distress, or in substandard conditions, or in financial distress, where an owner isn't paying their property taxes or other charges or whatever that is. And that's another example of things were bad before the pandemic. It was there's lots of distress in Bronx rental housing. It's not uncommon to hear from some of the clients who walk into Jumelia's office about just the really decrepit conditions that they live in the Bronx, and because of drops in income, which then lead to drops in rent collection, and on, that's obviously going to have an effect.
I want to go back to redlining, and can you guys define that and talk about how we can see the effects of it in New York City, probably 3 or 4 generations later?
Redlining, by definition, is the systemic denial of particular services, usually to a specific area that is habited by residents of a particular income and of a minority group. And it's usually for people with low income. And as we see it in the Bronx, it's a denial of banking services, so very few bank branches. And as Jacob mentioned earlier, then that has led to the effect of reverse redlining, where we get overinvestment, but sometimes not the best investment. So when we look at banking or insurance rates, if we were to compare the map right now of what those services look like for the Bronx, it wouldn't be that much different than what it looked like in Philadelphia for the mortgage loan banks that we see when we usually think of redlining in 1936. The Bronx is usually the red in many of those categories, so health, income level, distress when it comes to rent burden, low credit scores, you name it. All those factors are still really affecting many of the Bronx residents.
What access do you want to see to improve all of those things?
More housing where people are not paying more than 30% of their income. So if that's coming out of the New York City housing lottery, it would have to be more units within a particular band. So that would be at least 50% AMI or less. And just to give some context to the listeners and the viewers, household income would not exceed 27,532. So making sure that really the household that is being built is affordable for the people that currently live in the Bronx, not for people that will be pushed out of where they are and come to the Bronx. Definitely more higher paying jobs and stable jobs where people will not be let go as soon as the first month of this pandemic. And then helping people have the tools, so the products and access and information to be able to like save and prepare for financial crisis.
It's not a coincidence that all of our work, I think, has housing at its root. I think that comes out of an insight organizationally that housing stability and housing affordability is at the core of all the other things that we want. The ability to have the ability to have stable income and the ability to have disposable income, right, to do other things besides pay your rent. I mean, we're always thinking about housing stability and affordability. I think now more than ever, right, when so much of your life now has to happen in your home, when kids largely have to take classes on Zoom, or when certain people are working from home, now more than ever, it's important to have like stable, affordable, and decent housing.
In the ongoing fight for racial and economic equality, President Trump says vouchers and school choice are the solution.
Frankly, school choice is the civil rights statement of the year, of the decade, and probably beyond, because all children have to have access to quality education. A child's zip code in America should never determine their future.
Rosanna Gulisano is the librarian at one of the poorest schools in New York City. She's had to fight for every book and resource her students have. She even has a donation program for coats and shoes to make sure her kids have all their basic needs met and can focus on learning. She says her school needs more resources. Thanks so much for joining me, Rosanna. So you're the librarian at PS 11 in Highbridge. How did you end up there?
Well, I was a New York City teaching fellow, and they called me from California to teach in New York City. I'd never been to the Bronx before, and I got recruited to PS 11. And as soon as I got there, I found a room that was used as a storage room, and I noticed there was bookshelves in the back, and I decided, well, let me possibly do something with this. And the principal at the time said, we want you to be the librarian. Now, I'd never dreamt of being a librarian before. And then a lot of other teachers thought, that's a good job. Let me you know, I have seniority over me, and I went to library school, and that sealed the deal. And so I've been 18 years a librarian up until this year. I'm a remote 4th grade, solely remote classroom teacher.
So how does remote learning work for the library?
There's no library. There's no librarian. I was a sole librarian, and they were using the libraries as temporary isolation rooms, safe haven for the children, which I felt was a good choice. But they're so short of teachers, the whole city. So because I have a teaching credential, and anyone who had a teaching credential they called upon, I was one of them, and that's it. We're lucky to have a job. I feel fortunate to have a job.
What do you think how are you keeping the kids reading despite the pandemic?
Yeah, good question. Unfortunately, we have to put everything on PDF. They don't have books. I am doing fundraisers, a diversity book fundraiser, which we did get a lot of support. But now I have to figure out how to get the books to the families in a safe way. In a safe way, that's the key. I can get the resources, but now it's up to me to mail them. You know, so I'm raising funds for all types of different things to make sure that the children have books. And there's a lot of children that do not have home libraries or enough in their home libraries. So it is not as inspiring for a child to read on the screen as it is in holding their own book. It's been a very challenging issue.
So let's talk a little bit more about the storage room that you turned into the library. That was it, library-wise, for PS11. Is that right?
Yeah, we did not have a library. We have 2 buildings, although it's one school, PS11, the hybrid school in the Bronx. It is considered the most, before the pandemic, the poorest congressional district in the country. That was before COVID. So we had no library. And at that time, I wrote grants and got a lot of support from the grants, winning the REACH grant, where they actually came in, Target came in and their designers, and the children were able to design their own library with their own colors and schemes. And it was, the theme was the outdoors. So there's plants, etc., bright colors, rainbows, a lot of very encouraging themes, never give up. So we created the main building library, and then fortunately went to the annex and have a library for the K-1 children. So the main building houses the 2nd through 5th grade, and the annex is now it's the pre-K. We have a lot of little ones. We do puppet shows, read alouds constantly. 2 libraries that are connected. Now they're considered part of the New York City public library system, so that the children, not this year, but up until this year, were able to borrow books for the first time in the school.
You had to build those libraries yourself and get all those grants yourself. That didn't come from the city, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Absolutely. It was called the REACH grant. I competed in the city, won the library REACH. That was, I think, 2012. And at that time, the REACH grant was $10,000. But certain very influential people found out what I was doing, and they kicked it up to 25 grand. Then others, the New York Public Library found out, and they were able to supply we have Prometheum boards. We were able to get laptops for the first time. These are just some of the things that have come out of the grants. that we were fortunate to win, or I was fortunate to win.
Rosanna, talk a little bit more about PS 11. You said it was the poorest congressional district in the country. Why did the kids need the donation program that you run for shoes and coats and such?
Yeah, well, what happened was I didn't realize any of this. I didn't know any of it as a fact. You know, I came into the school, never had been in the Bronx. And I remember as a new teacher, I witnessed two girls who were new in the country from Africa, I believe, that got frostbite because they had sandals on in the winter. And the ambulance came to the school. I was looking out the door of the library. I didn't know what was happening. And later I had heard that that's what happened. And I knew I had to do something. And I reached out to my guidance counselor at Pratt, where I got my Library of Science degree. And she told me about New York Cares that did a coat drive, which is funny you brought this up, because today I found out we're in the bottom of the list of New York Cares, the bottom of the list.
You've been trying to get donations to families throughout the pandemic. What's that been like?
I'll tell you, it was an absolute shock. The first thing we had to do as teachers, right, is we had to reach out to the families just to get the children ready to sign in remotely so that we can give them instructions. So we were all given a list of the names and the phone numbers of the students that we were supposed to give instruction to as remote teachers. This is when the pandemic first hit. Well, as soon as I called the families, the first thing that I noticed was they didn't have food. Many of the families, they had babies without diapers. They had no formula. I mean, the list goes on. That was the awakening of what the extent was of devastation in these communities. The community I work in, PS 11, I can only speak about that, but that is exactly what happened. Every family I called, there was some issue about food. That was huge. And they didn't know how they were going to get food. At the time, there were very few pantries in the High Bridge. So I started reaching out we have a lot of support from Broadway community. There's Lynn Pinto, she's a producer on Broadway. Iona Alfonso, we got Christy Nye. I mean, I can make a list, and they all started to, one sandwich at a time, one small girl, they all started we gathered groceries, and we started to bring groceries into the High Bridge on a regular basis. We were going in once a week to start with, and then once every 2 weeks. And I have to tell you, when I first hit the High Bridge, after knowing that the families needed groceries, there was lines around the blocks. I'd never seen it. It was like the world ended, and everyone was having big food bags, empty bags, and empty carts. So we would go in, we'd pack up vans with all types of, basics. And I would find out from the families. I made a list, and we kind of developed a pod of families that we knew were the most in need, so that we could make sure it was safe. You can't just go in and start bringing food anywhere. Then I had to figure out where to go to meet the families that was safe. So we decided the steps of the High Bridge Library, the High Bridge Public Library, because it was closed. And we were meeting there again every week, every 2 weeks, bringing groceries on a regular basis. Now we're continuing to do that, not as regularly, about every 2 weeks, every month at Martin Luther King Triangle, because the library is closed. The public library is now open, so we can't use that because we don't have enough to feed everybody. We have our little pod, of families that we know on a regular basis that need it. And now we meet at Martin Luther King Triangle. And I'm still doing that. We're feeding the families for Thanksgiving. Those that we can. We want to do it for everybody, but we have it happening for those that we know need it most.
So you said you and other teachers try to send them things. What could the city and the
Yes.
state do to assist you and other teachers right now?
You know, the biggest thing that they could do, and this is before and during and every time, there's two issues. Yes, the resources. Yes. You know, right now, I think I read recently that our children are getting something like $734 less per head than other economically privileged students that need it less. Okay. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I can tell you that they're not getting anything. So resources, enormous. We have to beg, borrow, and steal for our resources. Teachers are reaching in their own pocket. One of the things is they cut out our teacher's choice this year.
Rosanna, when students have the means and the tools to succeed, what happens? What have you seen happen? How have you seen kids transform themselves?
Imagine what the family as a unit goes through. You see, it's not only the child that is directly affected, it's that family that has to realize that they cannot do as much as they would love to do to support their children having a better life. That is a crime. You know, so it really cuts very deep. They have no idea where even to start to get the resources. We have children that are reusing the papers, the pencils, the notebooks over and over again. Now, I can't even do that myself, let alone expecting a child to pay attention, and yet they do. So it will give them so much more time and show them that they are special. Confidence, give them confidence.
Climate change, social justice, health, and immigration all have elements of racial and economic equality. In past episodes, we've talked about environmental racism and the divide in health outcomes, among other topics. Going into the election, no matter where you live or what side of the aisle you stand on, voting is so important. It's the say you can have on all of these issues. Thanks to everyone who has made this series happen. Special thanks to this week's guests, Rosanna Gulisano, Jumelia Abrahamson, and Jacob Udell. Thanks also to Sheila Maloney from Norwood News, Louise Roboletto, and Michael Max, and everyone else at BronxNet, and to George Bodarky and Robin Shannon at WFUV. To read, watch, and listen to more from Bronx Connections, go to norwoodnews.org, WFUV.org, or bronxnet.org. I'm Eliot Schiaparelli. Thanks for watching. Election Day is a week away. Please vote.